Okay, we are back live with another Between the Pages book chat, and this is our last chat for 2020. So, and today our guest is fantasy author Allan Batchelder, and he's back again for another chat. And I'm going to turn it over to him and let him introduce himself. So, take it away.
Well, first of all, I'm honored to be the last guest of the year. It's been a rough year, so maybe we can send it out on a high note. Yes, I'm the author of Immortal Treachery, which is a 5-book dark fantasy series. Some would call it grimdark. And I've also written a number of short stories, and I'm working on a new novel, completely unrelated to the series.
Oh, that's cool. We got a chance to talk a little bit about that at the end. But anyway, so tell everybody a little bit about the series, what it's about, and why did you go into grimdark?
Well, let me address that first, I guess. I began reading, gosh, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, Stephen Erickson's series, The Malazan Book of the Fallen, which is pretty famous now. But when I started reading it, it was virtually unknown. And I struggled with it a lot. It took me well over a year to read the first book. But once I got through it, I felt like I'd fallen in love with it, with his writing style and his world building. And he recommended another author named Glenn Cook and described Cook's writings as sort of Lord of the Rings meets Vietnam on LSD, which I thought, well, I've got to read this book. That sounds incredible. And there are a lot of sort of military grunts in it. There are a lot of politics. There are original races. There are, it just seemed more realistic to me. And I know that sounds like a contradiction in terms, an oxymoron to say that fantasy is more realistic. But I don't know, when I'm reading, there are just some leaps I'm not willing to make. There are some leaps I'm not willing to take. And in Grimdark, the characters are, they live in a grayscale. Nobody's good. Nobody's particularly bad. And George R.R. Martin is a really good example of this. When we first meet Jaime Lannister, he's a horrible, despicable human being who has children with his sister, and he pushes Bran off a tower trying to kill him. And then later on in the series, we see that he has noble qualities. He has courage. He has loyalty. He has empathy. And that's a nice little bit of jujitsu that George R.R. Martin has done to us, where we take a character we absolutely despise and we end up caring about him, you know, because he's not black and white, and none of us are. None of us is entirely good and perfect. And I mean, I've never met a serial killer or Adolf Hitler, but most of us are not entirely bad either. And so to me, that just characters that are like that feel more realistic. There's a counter genre called Noble Bright, which I haven't read much of over the years. But in that, there's no profanity, there's no sex, there's no characters. The good characters have the best of intentions at all times, and they're terribly noble. And I just, I can't get into that kind of story because it's so foreign to anything I've seen or felt or imagined that I just can't connect to it. So long story short, I just felt like for me, Grimdark was more reflective of the world I could see and relate to. What my story is about, I may have mentioned this last time, but as a child of the 60s and 70s, I grew up watching Clint Eastwood Westerns and watching Bruce Lee movies. And my dad read, you know, a lot of Conan the Barbarian and John Carter of Mars. And whenever he finished a book, I would pick it up and read it. And so I really fell enamored with these, became enamored with these sort of anti-heroes who are mysterious, have a nebulous personal history, but who at the same time are physical prodigies. They're faster, stronger, more intuitive than anyone else in combat. And of course, I drew upon Beowulf and Ulysses, and because I do have a love for the classics, and just sort of rolled that all into one and created a character of a shadowy background. He struggles to remember his personal history himself, but he is unparalleled in combat, and he's not likable in a standard sense. You know, lots of people have said they just love the character. They love how unapologetic he is, because he's arrogant. He's very cocky, obviously, and he's just an unstoppable force. And it's a challenge as a writer then to give a character like that big enough obstacles so that there's some dramatic tension, there's some suspense about what's going to happen. So, spoiler alert, the opening of the very first book, he gets his hands and feet chopped off in the first 2 or 3 pages. So you're got to be wondering, like, how on earth is this guy going to survive this? It's kind of like when Ned Stark gets his head chopped off towards the beginning of George R.R. Martin's books. I mean, he seems to be the central character, and then Martin kills him. And then you're like, well, now what are we going to do? You just killed off the protagonist. So it's a big, sprawling world. There are hundreds of characters, lots of plot lines. There's politics and betrayals, a little bit of romance, lots of comedy, because I'm a big believer in comic relief. And, you know, you look at Macbeth. Right after Macbeth and his wife have murdered King Duncan, the bloodiest, most violent part of the play to that point. And 10 seconds later, out comes the porter, the drunken porter, making a lot of inappropriate sex jokes, you know. And I think that contrast provides a lot of relief. It switches gears. It revitalizes you for the next part of the story. So obviously I could talk forever on this subject. Did you have any other questions you wanted to ask?
So you were talking about getting the hands and feet chopped off. So how does past events affect the characters?
Well,
going forward?
He's the one character in the whole saga who struggles to discover his past, and when he does fully in book 5, it's earth-shaking for him. There's another character who has been mistaken or deceived about his past until book 4, and again, for him it's a world-shaking kind of revelation to learn who and what he really is and what's going on. I think that other characters are deeply informed by their past. I don't know how normal people could not be. And so, you know, if you're living with guilt about something, I just wrote a short story for a contest, and I'm currently tied for the lead. It just has to, I'll find out tomorrow if I won or came in second. And that character, yeah, thank you. That character is very much living in his past and trying to reconcile the things that he failed to do, and those cause him to make a choice in the present. And I think that's often the case too. I'm sure you're familiar with A Tale of Two Cities, and it's my favorite novel, I think. And Sidney Carton is the central character, but he's also an anti-hero. He's this drunken, sarcastic scoundrel who ends up redeeming himself in the final page of the novel, you know, and making the ultimate sacrifice. And, you know, if you're not moved by that, you're not a human being. And so those tales of redemption, redeeming your life from horrible mistakes of your past, sometimes they're not even your fault. Sometimes you're just a witness and you failed to act in a positive manner, but you carry that stigma for the rest of your life until you can make that choice.
Yeah. So, would you describe your main character as optimistic or pessimistic?
I think he's blindly optimistic. He's wildly overconfident in his ability to handle situations, and he gets proven wrong a number of times. And all that does is make him angrier and more determined to succeed at whatever it is. Whenever he gets beaten, and I won't say he gets beaten in combat, but he certainly gets outmaneuvered on a lot of occasions. Whenever he does get beaten, he uses that as motivation to come back, twice as strong, twice as aggressive as he had been before. Other characters, there's another major character who's terribly cynical and pessimistic. And I won't say who it is, but he ends up having a very sweet finale. So sometimes good things happen even to the most negative of us, and you have to open your eyes and say, well, okay, there's no doubt about it. This is a positive event for me. And then I have another character who is just wildly optimistic because he's not very bright. Sometimes people are optimistic, from a perspective of being very informed, but this guy's just clueless as the day is long. And he never loses that, really. Although he has a sad ending. So, yeah, his ending is sad and tragic. But, you wouldn't want it any other way.
Yeah, I've done that a few times to some nice characters too. So,
yeah.
So do you play with any ethics, morals, or cultural values in the series?
I think I do. There's a character who discovers that she is in love with another of the female characters, and she's willing to betray her only friend in order to achieve that love. And that's, a deeply rooted friendship. And she's willing to betray that. And it comes back to bite her in the end. We learn terrible, terrible things about my main character. Things that are unconscionable and inexcusable. And yet I found a way even for him to find redemption. If you could find redemption for Genghis Khan, for example, that's what I think I've achieved here. So I love to get into those ethical and moral quagmires that you're talking about. In terms of what was the other thing you said? Race or nationality?
Cultural values.
Cultural values. There's a time when the main character travels to an entirely different part of the world, and there's a people in Africa who, I can't remember who exactly it was, but they would battle by counting coup. They would charge at an opposing tribe and try to touch them with sticks, and that would be counting coup. And if you did that, then you'd won that particular combat, and there was no need for death. That was just how they did it. And so my main character encounters someone who holds these beliefs, and when he beats the guy in combat, the other fellow is completely befuddled that Tarman Vikers would attack him with a sword and try to hurt him. It's beyond his understanding of the way combat is supposed to work. And then I have a race of characters who are roughly based on Zulu specifically. And, as a white person writing about people of color, you do have to tread so very carefully and with respect. And people say to me, well, how can you write about women? You're not a woman, you're a man. And, all I can say to that is I have 3 very strong sisters, and I had a mother, obviously, and I have a wife. So I try to be as sensitive as I can to issues of gender or race or culture, or religion. And also I'm a middle school teacher. I think that if I were able to make my living full time as an author, and I may get there someday, I could, pull out the stops and really write whatever I want. But I don't use, well, let me put it this way. There are plenty of authors out there who use much more graphic violence and sexuality and profanity than I do. I try to just keep it at an appropriate level in the context of the character. And I've certainly read novels where, the F-bomb is every other word. And I've never experienced a culture like that. So I don't write that.
Okay, so what is the most evil thing your main character has done that you can tell us without spoilers?
I'm trying to figure out how to say this without spoilers, because it's a major spoiler. Let's just say that there is no one he hasn't or wouldn't kill when the battle lust is upon him. And I mean no one.
Ooh, intriguing.
I'll leave that open to imagination. When he goes into his battle rage, you just don't want to be within 20 feet of him.
Okay, so what's the kindest thing one of your antagonists has done?
The kindest thing one of my antagonists has done. I think they've done things, kind things, for selfish reasons. They've taken care of people that they believed they loved, not because it was the right thing to do, but because it would keep that person nearby. It would. There have been cases where a pretty nasty person healed someone because it was convenient to their plans and not because that person otherwise needed healing. But you're right. It's often said in acting, because I've been a professional actor since 1983, I think, that you can't play a character who doesn't love themselves. Even Hitler. Hitler didn't wake up in the morning and go, "I'm the world's most evil man." I mean, he liked something about himself. And there were other people in his life that he liked, that he cared about. Whether we like that or not, whether we enjoy him as a human being or not, he liked Eva Braun and she liked him. So even the villains need to have some degree of humanity. And there's that great Shakespeare quote. I think I'm paraphrasing a little bit, and it's from Richard III. "No beast so fierce, but knows some touch of pity. But I know none, and therefore am no beast." So Richard thinks, that he's without empathy, without mercy, without pity. And then in the very end, we see him begging, reduced to the stature of a small child, begging for relief, begging for help. So the humbling is a really intriguing aspect to overpowered characters who finally realize their number.
Okay, your video's frozen. Okay, we seem to have lost the feed on our guest for temporary here. So yeah, the video has temporarily frozen on the feed, so we'll wait a few minutes here while see if it comes back. Okay, we've lost the video feed on our guests, and it was interesting conversation to lose it in. But and when there we've lost our guest. Well, so we'll sit here and fill the void, as it were, until he pops back in with the feed. That is the vagaries of live uh, interviewing, is that the technology doesn't always like to cooperate with us, especially if the maybe Christmas volume has slowed the internet down. Who knows? But anyway, so and definitely, if you're watching, which I probably am boring the crap out of you at the moment, trying to fill in the time till our guest comes back in, be sure to go and check out Allan's book series, Immortal Treachery, as especially if you like grimdark, because it sounds wonderful. And here we go. He's come back in.
Sorry
And
about that. My
no
internet
worries. It's happened before. The internet does not cooperate all the
it's
time.
gotten progressively worse since COVID started. And I don't know if that has to do with everyone in the world going online at once, or
It could be, and the companies that are running the feeds, they've cut back on all their workers and stuff, so they're short staffed too. So I'm sure that doesn't help.
yeah.
But anyway, so I'll give you the next question. So is there a type of scene that you don't like to write?
I don't like, and I'm not comfortable with graphic sex scenes. I don't know. Partially, it's again because I'm a teacher, and partially it's because the older I get, I don't know what it's about. I don't know why. The more uncomfortable I become with it, and that's very weird. If you'd known me in college in my theater days, I mean, I was the least prude person that you could ever imagine. But now I'm just, I don't even like watching people kiss on screen. It just makes me uncomfortable. There is a little bit of romance in my stories, but I don't really dive into the details. Joe Abercrombie is one of the leaders in my genre and extremely successful, and he writes some kind of messy sex scenes, and I just skip those.
Yeah,
It's not for me.
Yeah, I agree with you somewhat. I mean, I don't mind sex scenes if they actually fit the plot or if they have a purpose. If they flow.
Right.
But I mean, so much, especially with the Game of Thrones did this a lot. There's a lot of gratuitous stuff just thrown in there for shock value,
Right.
and that I don't like. I think
that's true too of the horror genre, both in
Yeah.
books and especially in movies. And I might have enjoyed that when I was in my 20s, but again, I don't like it at all, and I really hate rape scenes. I think that they're overused, and I think that they are exploitive. I think they're a cliche. And I also think that you can refer to them without going into terrible detail. One thing that Sophocles did so well with Oedipus was the worst things happened off stage, and we'd hear about them reported by characters. Oh, this happened. Oh, that happened. And we wouldn't have to actually see Oedipus gouging his eyes out or having, whatever with his mother. And I just think that's an effective way to do things. So there is one character in my entire 750,000 page series who's been raped, but it happens off stage. You only hear about it in passing, and you don't really get much in terms of details. So those scenes really make me uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think a lot of authors do tend to use rape as an easy way to villainize their villains.
You're right.
Too.
Right.
I mean, because it's pretty much rapists are evil.
Yeah. Yes.
So
well, my mother always had a thing. She would never read a book in which a child was killed, and I can see that. I can understand that. I can appreciate that perspective. But if you've ever read Pet Sematary, you realize how central to the plot that particular event was. I don't know. Everyone has their line in the sand that they won't cross, and mine is mullets. I won't let my characters have mullets. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, so do you have any new projects that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'm writing. So I'm a big fan of Shakespeare, have been since I was 11 or 12, because my dad used to take me to the theater all the time. And so I started thinking, what if Shakespeare had faked his own death? And what would he do and where would he go? So I have him sailing to Jamestown, the first English colony, in the first successful English colony in North America. And while there, he, among many other things, political intrigue, the introduction of slavery, he runs afoul of Wendigo, which turns out to be the exact same species of creature as Grendel from Beowulf. And it's a problem that only Shakespeare can solve. So I've got him being kind of he's got a little bit of Sherlock Holmes in him in this one, although he's old, he's a little paunchy, his knees are bad, his stomach is bad. He's definitely feeling the effects of being an older guy with a poor diet. So it's historical. It's what is the word? Supernatural. And then after that, I'm writing a steampunk, a humorous steampunk fantasy with my son, who is an illustrator. And then I have a bunch of other ideas after that. So you never stop thinking. You never stop imagining.
No, you don't. Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up there, and I'll let you tell everyone where they can find you and your books.
Well, if you type Immortal Treachery into your search bar, you'll get 10 zillion hits. I'm literally everywhere, but chiefly, I suppose, I'm on Amazon. You can also order my books directly from Crossroad Press. I'm on Kobo, Smashwords, Goodread, every social media platform I could possibly think of. And that's something we should talk about another time, is how time consuming that is. But hopefully it'll be worthwhile.
Yeah, that would take up an hour, I think, at least. Or more.
Yeah. No, that's true. Well, I hope you have a wonderful holiday season, whatever you celebrate. And please stay safe and wear a mask. That's my personal bias.
Okay, so thank you for being here. It was a pleasure chatting with you again. And that's it for this year for Between the Pages Book Chat. We will be back on January 2nd with our next show. And happy holidays, everyone. And that's it for now. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you.